And then some great things here, right? Public people understand, that they're maturing, so intercourse is not healthy for husband or wives, right? So that's a good message, right? And then it acknowledges abstinence is normal and healthy, great. Like you're not, there's nothing wrong with you for abstaining. And then you got to be careful with these because this is obviously going to, be against some parents' values. If you are a person that doesn't believe in contraception, for instance, traditional Catholics don't believe in contraception, then you're not going to be open about conversations about condom use because that's against your belief system. And then discuss the important relationship between sexual and emotional feelings. Not necessarily, but you can kind of drive a truck through this. This can be a danger zone, which kind of spirals into, well, I feel this way and I want to do this thing. So you have to be careful. Again, this is a complicated set here. And then I don't agree that attaining cognitive maturity happens at age 13, 17. I have a 15-year-old. I've had other teenagers. I think most parents would agree. That kids really aren't ready to make some consequential decisions. The irony here is, okay, so they're cognitively mature, which means you would be independent from your peers, but then the next bullet, literally the next bullet says, you continue to be influenced by peers. To me, those things are contradictory. And then, clearly articulating your family religious values is great. And then using inclusive language sounds great. I actually like the idea of that, but I'll explain what this actually means in the next slide. So recognizing some people may be gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, great. I'll use the pronouns you prefer, all that. But like what they mean by inclusive language is a little bit crazy in my view. You can't refer to people even by him or her. You're someone with a vulva versus a girl or a woman. I think that's a little far. I think a lot of women get offended if they're called a person with a vulva. I know I certainly be offended with a person with my genitalia. It just sounds all wrong. I think it's okay if you call people girl or woman. But that's what advocates for you. Again, respecting people's pronouns, all that, but I don't think it doesn't make sense to say you're a person with a vulva. All right, any questions on that? And then I'll go to some easier topics. I think these will be largely agreeable. You have the best questions. Go for it.
Well, because I sense that we're moving to the next thing.
Yes, ma'am.
But you started the presentation laying the groundwork of the history.
Yes.
And you named controversial. And you named them controversial.
Correct.
Which means there was an entire body of professionals studying this and contributing to the evolving conversation.
Oh, yeah.
But you cherry-picked the most controversial and framed that as if it's a through line exclusively to where we're about to land right now.
So
I
don't intend to do that. So,
but you must have intended to, because that's exactly what your opening slides were. So, where is the information about the fuller academic, theological, sociological, cultural conversation about the development of sex education? Because we're about to jump into it,
sure.
And I know that what we're about to talk about was not only formed by the conversation of those few really controversial.
So they were few and controversial, but they're also very influential. Now, they are not even Kinsey would tell you, and Kinsey's autobiographer would tell you, the society was changing even without Kinsey. But Kinsey accelerated that. We published multiple books on
So
sexuality.
why did you pick him to start? Like, why was it important for you for that to be your opening slide?
Yeah, so just to make sure that folks knew that there was a history here and it was influenced by these three folks are very controversial and influential.
Very controversial.
Yeah.
But not by any means the solo act.
Oh no, I don't mean why they're solo act.
Right, so before we start to critique sex education, how can you fill out that story for us a little bit more so we have a more fulsome context for having this conversation about sex education?
Well, I mean, obviously, I would say those were the leading folks, right? They were controversial, but they're also the leading folks in this. You can get into Magnus Hirschfeld and other folks that were older, right? That started down this path. I just kept it to the last, in the 1900s. There's definitely been studies of sexuality going back to the Greek times, right? Where they thought that, women were basically a malformed male, right? They had different ideas about that, and we can go through the whole thing. My point was to say that we can definitely see the influence of these ideas in these organizations in our curriculum, and that's really the only point I was trying to
in that they weren't in isolation of the vetting of the entire culture.
Correct,
That
yeah.
engaged in these conversations.
Yes.
So it's not, where we are, where we've landed, we're about to talk about, was not formed in an isolated bubble,
Oh, no.
apart from, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I wouldn't
so
say you could trace it, like, everything came from these three people.
nothing's,
I'm not
or
saying
even
that.
those Greeks, like, you
Yeah.
can cherry pick that out of history too and say, well, we didn't stick with that, did we? So-
Right, exactly.
Right.
But the point is,
Thank
you
for
see the
clarifying that,
influence
because I think
of
that
them
is
on the,
misleading. No.
what's that, sorry?
I was just thanking her for clarifying that,
Yeah.
because I do think it is a bit misleading to come right out of the gate with that information.
Sure.
Without painting a full picture.
Yeah, absolutely, and so my point is that these three influenced the organizations that influenced the sex education, right? That was really kind of what I was saying there. Not, I wasn't trying to give you a comprehensive sex history, lesson or anything. I was saying these three were very they were influences on the three activist organizations, which are in turn influencing the sex education that you see today. That
But
was
it's
really
like
the
any
point.
product, like New Coke, right? It
Right.
came out, it wasn't popular, it disappeared.
Right,
Even over time, the influence of these, of any voice is again vetted, massaged, adapted, evolved, peer reviewed, so. I just, for future presentations, because I know you guys obviously put a lot of work into yourselves creating this.
sure. Oh, yeah.
You're going to have people that are sitting here who are saying, but, we are ready for a more sophisticated conversation about the origins of sex education.
Sure.
I just was, just so that I understand, like, I guess I'm not understanding what is there other individuals that maybe could have been
Well,
included?
I think that the word you just said, individuals, that's the fallacy. That individuals, that you can draw a through line of individuals that have created this moment. That's just not how it works, So it starts us off with a false lens of how to then evaluate the benefits and negatives of what's being offered in Frederick County. It's two-dimensional.
I see what you're trying to say.
Is
yeah.
there someone that can enlighten us, like in our presentation here, to include the information that you're seeing?
Yeah, I don't know what's missing each
I mean,
other.
I would love to hear that.
Well, the thing is that we'll
Mindful.
never hear is that it's something it's not a single line of like, oh, that's the actual path from the past to today. This is a complex, multidisciplined, multidimensional, intersecting conversation that is American history.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
history
not-
is an influence, but so
But
is
you-
modern culture, right?
But you picked a
Right.
starting point, and that tells me
Right.
something about your agenda. And
Well,
I'm sure you don't want that.
Well,
So
no, my
you
agenda
do
is to
well
just tell you where the advocacy organizations that influence our sex ed curriculum got their ideas. That's really the agenda.
Well,
I'm not
but
trying to
even-
paint you a
but even that-
go through all sex
But that's
history.
my point, is that one person didn't get to be the one voice that all the advocacy groups are married to.
Oh, I'm not
and then
saying that.
create-
I'm just saying the
right.
influence. Yeah, I'm just saying the influence.
One of a society full of influences.
Well, we were right, but we did trace some of the, some of
But-
the
but
Harry
that means
Benjamin was
that-
referred by Alfred
But
Kinsey.
it means
There's a
some of those
connection.
things were vetted by an entire culture over,
Which
decades
I
and
think you're
decades.
talking about. that
I'm
are
just saying
vetted.
all of it, I'm just saying it's a fallacy to draw a line from this controversial figure to this controversial figure to this one. Oh, and now these cherry-picked advocacy groups.
Well, those
And-
are the three big advocacy groups in the U.S.
Well, I
There
would
are-
say-
there are no others.
No, that's absolutely not
If I
true.
could just add, so when you bring up Planned Parenthood that was established in 1916, it's over 100 years old.
Correct.
So clearly a lot has changed
Right.
from the implementation and startup of that group to today.
Right.
So to point out bullet points of what their thoughts were back in 1916
Right.
are very different than a lot of what they do today. So I think it's, I mean, if you're going to call it out as the history of Planned Parenthood, fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think that, it's not fair to say that this is the organization today that we are then pulling information from. It's very different.
Well, I don't think that a lot of the things, the bullet points that were up there, especially for Planned Parenthood, are things that are from actually 1916. I think they're actually information that's current, if you would look at their website and see what they're about now.
I mean, if you're willing to go back and pull up that slide, I mean, I don't want to waste your time. I'm
But
happy to go
also
back
the
and
thing
look at
is,
So the-
we don't have like a month to go through this. We're, you know,
No,
I think
right,